Weekdays on CBS Mornings.
Morning news matters because it sets the tone for your day, and it's a way of getting you started.
We're going to uplift you. We're going to send you out your way. Day to day, that first draft of history, it happens right here.
CBS Mornings.
They still want to spend more money next year than we spent this year. That's a red line.
They are offering bad choices to the American people. They are saying, let's put our veterans on the chopping block.
I've seen nothing out of the president or the Senate.
I'm aspirational and inspirational, and that if I do run for president, people should vote for me because I represent something different.
Hello, I'm Nancy Cordes in Washington, and welcome to America Decides. Debt ceiling talks took some new twists and turns at the Capitol today, with time running out to reach a deal. Just one day after President Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy called their meeting at the White House productive, the speaker made clear today that the two sides are actually still nowhere near an agreement. There's a little more than a week left now before the U.S. could face its first ever government default if the nation's borrowing limit is not raised. Treasury will not have all the money it needs to pay the bills. For more on this, Weijia Jiang and Nicole Killian join us now. Weijia is CBS News senior White House correspondent, and Nicole is CBS News congressional correspondent. Welcome to both of you. Nicole, let's start with you on a busy day. A lot of activity on the Hill, and it is really starting to feel like whiplash. 1 minute leaders are saying that these meetings are going well. The next minute we hear that they're going terribly. What's the state of play as you understand it right now?
Well, the state of play is that we still don't have an agreement, and despite hours of negotiating between the Speaker's team and the White House, it seems that both sides are still far apart. I did have a chance to speak with the Speaker earlier today, as well as one of the top Democrats here in the House, about where things currently stand. So to be clear, you're not close to a deal?
Look,
or are you close?
No, they still want to spend more money next year than we spent this year. That's a red line.
You still think things are far apart?
I do.
I mean, how do you close that gap?
You know, this has always been fully up to the Republican Party. They have manufactured this crisis. They are offering bad choices to the American people. They are saying, let's put our veterans on the chopping block. Let's cut 30 million medical appointments for our veterans, or you can default. That is the crisis they have created.
So whether you're talking to Democratic leaders or Republican leaders, the one thing they are agreeing on right now, Nancy, is that they are still very far apart. That being said, just off camera here, you can't see it, but we are hearing from some members of the Speaker's negotiating team right now. That is Congressman Garrett Graves, as well as Congressman Patrick McHenry, who said that he does really want a deal, but there are just fundamental differences that remain when it comes to these big picture issues of spending. And that's really why these talks seem to be going around and around and around. Congressman Graves said he feels like he's buying a used car. But at the same time, they are continuing to praise the White House negotiators. They do feel that everyone is putting in a good faith effort here. But that being said, it's unclear if they will meet again with White House negotiators tonight or even tomorrow. Congressman Graves telling me right now nothing is scheduled.
And Weijia, we know that right now the White House is offering to keep spending steady for the next 2 years. Republicans want deeper cuts. They want to impose caps for 6 years. And we heard some House Republicans start to argue today that the White House has been showing a lack of urgency in these negotiations. How's the White House responding to that?
The press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, was directly asked about this, and she said that was a ridiculous statement and took the opportunity to once again shift the blame to the Republicans, saying, look, it's the House Republicans who dragged their feet on passing a budget which delayed the conversation with the White House. She insisted that the position was always very clear from President Biden, which was he wanted to see the House Speaker's budget proposal. And that is what he said after their first conversation that happened in February. The president showed his proposed budget shortly after that and was demanding to see one from Republicans too, which didn't happen for months later. And so that is why the White House says it's actually the Republicans who dragged their feet on this and put them in this precarious situation where they are now negotiating until the very last minute. But we should remember, Nancy, as you very well know, up until recent weeks, the White House insisted that they wouldn't negotiate at all, that it was a non-starter to even link the debt ceiling discussion with the budget. But of course, that's exactly where we are now. So I think there's plenty of blame to go around, and you know, there will be plenty of conversations after the fact. But right now, they're both trying to get this over the line because both acknowledge what a catastrophe it would be for the economy if they don't.
No question. And Nicole, let's just talk timing for a minute. I mean, Speaker McCarthy says he's committed to giving his members 72 hours to read the bill whenever it's available, whenever there's a deal. It could also take a couple days for this bill to pass the Senate. So if the deadline really is June 1st, they need to cut a deal within the next couple of days, right?
Well, really the next couple of hours, if you think about it. I mean, the House is due to recess on Thursday. And again, we're still not at the point where we have any type of agreement. And as you very well know, it takes some time to craft that legislation and then let members read that. You know, right now, even members are asking me, well, what are you hearing? Have you heard? Are we going home? Are we staying here? Of course, with the Memorial Day weekend approaching. So, you know, even members themselves are concerned and conflicted about what this will mean. Obviously, they're all committed to trying to get the job done. And the Speaker has said, you know, they will, once they reach an agreement, and get this over the finish line. And if they have to come back over the holiday weekend, so be it. But even in the Senate, you know, many members have acknowledged they're probably going to need at least a week to, you know, hold a vote. And again, right now, the Senate is not in. So that just leaves a couple of days when they return next week. So they really are pressing up against the deadline. But everyone treating this as a very firm deadline in terms of June 1st and taking it very seriously.
And if they don't meet that deadline, some Democrats have floated the idea that President Biden could just sidestep this entire showdown by invoking the 14th Amendment, which is something that's never been tried before. You asked the White House press secretary about that. What did she have to say about that option?
Well, initially she said that President Biden made very clear that it is not the solution to the current problem we are in. But that's actually not what he said the last time he spoke publicly about it, which was during his trip to Hiroshima last week. He said that he was looking at that option and that he did believe he had the authority to do it. But the question was whether they could use it in time to avoid a default. Because the issue is he anticipated it would be appealed and that it would get tangled up in court and that there actually wouldn't be enough time to use it before that played out in court to avoid a default. And so after I pointed that out to her, you know, I think she left the door a little bit open that he is still considering it, but she stressed that it is up to Congress to get this done and that the president wants something on his desk to sign.
Not a great plan B, that's for sure. Weijia Jiang and Nicole Killian, thank you so much. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis will launch his 2024 White House bid tomorrow night in a live event with entrepreneur Elon Musk. Sources say the event will be on Twitter Spaces, the social media site's platform for audio chats. It's not clear if Musk is going to formally endorse DeSantis in that event. There will also be a launch video from DeSantis' campaign, followed by trips to presidential primary states. For more on all of this, CBS News political reporter Aaron Navarro joins us now. Aaron, you were able to confirm the details this afternoon. Not really a surprise that DeSantis is announcing his candidacy tomorrow, but it is a surprise that he's doing it on Twitter with Elon Musk. What's the strategy?
So Elon Musk and former President Donald Trump have very similar audiences. There is overlap in the support there. And while Musk has not said if he's going to endorse DeSantis, it's pretty darn close. And this is a way for DeSantis to cut into that ardent Trump support online. One Republican strategist noted to me, quote, "No one has more street cred online with MAGA people than Elon Musk." Another noted, if you just pair these big names, that's a lot of earned media for DeSantis as he starts this presidential campaign.
That's a good point. Certainly, Elon Musk has deep pockets. He's well known. He's a successful businessman. At the same time, he, in the past few months since he bought Twitter, has been sort of playing footsie with white supremacists, with conspiracy theorists online. Is DeSantis looking to send a message by appearing with him, and what message is that?
So Elon and DeSantis do go back, at least in modern history. Elon has been supportive of a DeSantis run in general. Both rail against the media, cultural issues, kind of paint themselves as anti-establishment. But another thing that one strategist noted to me is that this essentially kicks Trump off Twitter. Trump may develop a sort of vendetta with Elon, may stick to Truth Social, which he already kind of has. But when I reached out to DeSantis' team to see if there is concern about being tied with Elon Musk at the start of his presidential campaign, they just texted back, nothing to share.
We do know that one thing that Donald Trump cares about is Twitter, even though he's got his own social media site now. Aaron Navarro, thanks so much for bringing us the latest details.
Thanks for having me.
The House Freedom Caucus is demanding an end to debt ceiling talks until the Senate passes spending cuts House Republicans want. Straight ahead, we'll speak with a caucus member, Congressman Chip Roy, as the debt default deadline looms. You're streaming America Decides.
It's important to our nation.
I wonder how you think about where America is at this moment.
It's on Face the Nation.
Can there be stability if Vladimir Putin remains in power?
Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan on CBS.
America Decides, taking you inside American democracy.
The most important stories on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis.
You're going to hear a lot of reporting.
It is clearly a pivotal moment.
Gun control, the economy, education. Both sides of the political aisle fight it out for power.
Bringing you the analysis that you need.
Thoughtfully, with context.
Be part of the conversation.
On CBS News Streaming.
Welcome to America Decides.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
I always tell people that Twitter would not be Twitter without Black Twitter. It's just us being in fellowship with each other.
And it becomes a conversation you don't want to be left out of.
People really started to recognize the power of activism on Twitter.
Based on that one tweet, the hashtag #OscarSoWhite was trending around the world.
If anything has really powered Black Twitter, it's been humor.
If your food ain't right, oh, we're going to tell you about that, too.
We tend to create change, create culture and cool.
That's how movements happen on Black Twitter and go beyond more than that.
Black Twitter, the Twitterverse that changed a generation. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When weather turns extreme.
The threat of severe weather and dangerous tornadoes is expected to last.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology. So advanced, so real.
Let's bring in our partners at the Weather Channel.
Now 6 feet of water, imagine that. Cars that can act like battering rams.
These hyper-realistic simulations show you what the weather will look and feel like before it happens.
Feel the forecast. Streaming on CBS News.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
The carnage in our nation's schools has become painfully repetitive.
Not one more child!
School shootings have parents fighting mad.
I promised my daughter I was going to fight. It's going to keep on happening.
And teachers taking lessons in how to fight back.
This is an exercise.
We approach it as it's you or them.
It shouldn't have to be your teacher's job to protect your life.
But will the battle over gun control,
people are afraid that they're going to lose their gun rights altogether,
be the hardest lesson of all?
The exercise, you're having to shoot at an adult. Are you prepared to have to kill one of your students?
Guns in the Classroom, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Everybody wakes up in the morning and they are pelted with alerts that frighten them, news that agitates them. With this show, we have the time to explain what's going on. Here's a deeper understanding of what's happening.
Prime Time with John Dickerson. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Welcome Welcome back to America Decides. The House Freedom Caucus has called for, quote, no further discussion on raising the debt ceiling until the Senate passes the bill that House Republicans approved late last month. This as we are now less than 2 weeks away from the Treasury's default deadline. Republican Congressman Chip Roy joins us now. He represents Texas's 21st District, and he is also a member of the House Freedom Caucus. Congressman, thank you for being here.
Good evening, Nancy.
So the Freedom Caucus has been urging Speaker McCarthy to hold the line. In fact, you yourself were quoted as saying in a GOP meeting this morning that, quote, this shouldn't be about a deal. It should be about the country. Do you want Speaker McCarthy to stop negotiating with the president?
I have no problem with the Speaker of the House talking to the president now that the president has finally found it in him to come sit down with us, right? Which we all knew he would eventually, even though he said he wouldn't while he dithered for 104 days, assuming that we wouldn't come up with a bill, but we did. And we passed a bill that would raise the debt ceiling, even though many of us would rather not do so, because we wanted to put the country first, but we wanted to put us on a path to fiscal responsibility. But importantly, we wanted to make sure we weren't doing, as my Democratic colleagues want to do, subsidize the wealthy at the expense of hardworking Americans, with massive tax credits for billion-dollar corporations, with subsidies that go for EVs that go to 80-something% go to people making over $100,000, student loans that go to people, to the 13% of Americans who have student loans, 56% of whom have graduate degrees. What about the 87% who don't have student loans? We're not interested in subsidizing the rich at the expense of the hardworking American family, and so that's why we put forward a responsible bill, and we're waiting for the president to actually step to the plate.
But if the Speaker does compromise with the president, you're not going to vote for that compromise package. Is that correct?
Yeah, look, I don't like negotiating in the press. I don't like drawing red lines. Speaker McCarthy has done a great job over the last several months uniting this conference. We're united for the American people. I think the bill that we passed is a good bill. I think we actually should go further. I think we should add HB 2. We need to secure the border. But look, we'll sit down and talk to anybody so long as it's a responsible plan. But I don't want to negotiate against ourselves. We've done our part of the job.
You want to stick with the bill that you passed last month. I heard you say that. But here's what Moody's had to say about that deep spending cuts in the bill. They said the bill would cut into near-term economic growth. They said it would meaningfully increase the likelihood of a recession and that it would lead to the loss of about 780,000 jobs. Why not accept a compromise that is less likely to be a shock to the economy now and then seek more cuts when the economy is stronger?
Now, I mean, the thing that's a shock to the economy is an administration at war with the American people, spending money we don't have, driving up inflation, weakening the dollar, and putting us into an environment where we're staring at stagflation for the first time in about 40 years. Well, that's what we're trying to get out of. Get out of the regulatory morass and the tax subsidies that are going to basically pick winners and losers and make it to where our strongest asset, American energy, is getting destroyed so that we can chase this pipe dream of unicorn energy while empowering China and empowering our enemies instead of making sure that America is strong and prosperous. So if you want a strong economy, get American energy going again instead of subsidizing billion-dollar corporations and wealthy Americans at the expense of the hardworking American family.
The last time that Congress got even close to a default, it ended up costing the Treasury Department about $1 billion in higher borrowing costs. How worried are you about the prospect of default this time around?
Yeah, we're not going to default unless President Biden chooses to for some strange reason, because we have plenty of cash to pay off the interest that we owe. Everybody knows that. This is a false crisis that the president has manufactured. So I'm not worried about it in the slightest bit. By the way, $1 billion, that's kind of chump change when you're talking about what all of these guys want to do. That's why we're $32 trillion in debt. We're trying to pump the brakes. Our bill would save $5 trillion over 10 years, $1 trillion in year one, and it would do the job that the American people sent us here to do. Nothing's perfect. I get it. Happy to talk to my Democratic colleagues if they're ever actually serious about fiscal restraint. But they're not. They just want to talk about supposedly raising taxes. You know what you want? If you want tax revenue, stop giving away tax subsidies to billion-dollar corporations. We could do that tomorrow. Let's come together on a bipartisan basis and stop the subsidization of the rich at the expense of hardworking families.
Are you going to continue to support Kevin McCarthy as Speaker if he cuts a deal that you don't think is worthy of this moment?
I'm not going to play hypotheticals. Look, the Speaker has been doing a great job negotiating for a unified Republican conference. We can have disagreements at times and figure those out inside the family, but we did it when we passed the bill the first time. We did it when we passed the border security bill, H.R. 2. Meanwhile, Democrats, what are they doing? I'm still waiting. The Senate's just sitting over there. I don't even know what the hell they do over there. And the president goes and flies off to Japan. The Senate adjourns for a week or is in recess. They think it's such a crisis. Why are they at home? We're here working.
Congressman Chip Roy of Texas, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Nancy.
More migrants are coming to the U.S. every day seeking asylum after the end of Title 42 2 weeks ago. Some migrants have been moved from the border to various towns and cities up north, cities that may not be used to taking in large numbers of migrants. CBS News has some new polling data showing how people are feeling about the migrant situation. And here to help us break it down is CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto. Anthony, good to see you.
Great to see you, Nancy. How are you?
I am great. So how do Americans feel about the U.S. migrant situation?
Well, we started out by looking at partisan breaks and in particular Democrats who live in cities, right? Because a lot of these cities are populated with a lot of Democrats in them. And in principle, those Democrats say they would be willing to try to find at least temporary housing for migrants in their areas. 80% of Democrats who live in cities, in fact, say that. Similarly, some number of Democrats who live in suburbs. Republicans less so. But this is where the principle runs into the practical. Do they think that there's space in there? Well, that 80% who favors housing migrants, that number drops to 59% when you ask if they think they have facilities in order to do so. So that's the sticking point there, and you're seeing that play out in all those reports you mentioned, Nancy.
So Democrats more likely to be willing to take in migrants in their city or town, but they worry that they have the resources to do so. So what do people think about the reasons that migrants are attempting to cross the border? And does that end up factoring into how they want the U.S. to handle it?
In many ways, that is the key question, Nancy, because look at the perceptions people have about the motivations of folks trying to cross. We asked, are they trying to cross to escape violence and crime elsewhere? And look at these partisan breaks. You get almost half of Democrats who feel that most of the would-be migrants or the migrants are, in fact, doing that. And at least even more of them say that some are, whereas Republicans don't have that perception. They're more mixed on it, saying that they believe that at least some are, but not that most are. And the reason that this is important is that when you connect U.S. immigration policy desires to what you think about the migrants, you see folks who would stop all immigration are much more likely to think that most of the migrants are looking for handouts and much less likely to think that those migrants are, in fact, trying to escape violence. So your perception of the motivation of those migrants is really connected to what you think about U.S. immigration and border policy. That's an important way to understand it, Nancy.
Fascinating, makes a lot of sense, and helps to explain why we're so divided in this country. Anthony Salvanto, thank you so much.
Thank you.
The Republican presidential field for 2024 is growing, but there are others who are still considering whether to join the race. We're going to talk to one of them next. You're streaming America Decides.
An original documentary from CBS reports. Controversial Congressman George Santos.
Why won't you answer our questions?
How did he manage to get elected?
Thank you very much. God bless you and God bless the USA.
George Santos' campaign was a campaign of deceit, lies, fabrication.
And who is he, really?
I knew him as Anthony DeVolder from Queens.
Really, who he is, he's a fraud.
I compare him to the Tinder swindler.
From people who know him, the truth, the facts, the lies.
He would say that he was worth $100 million.
It's an incredibly cynical episode in American politics, beyond satire.
Had you ever seen anything like this?
No, and I hope I never see it again.
Campaign of Deceit, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She dazzled on the court and off the court as a businesswoman.
Thank you for joining us on Person to Person. Tennis superstar and entrepreneur Serena Williams.
an original CBS Reports documentary.
I asked my students, what are we going to do about racism in the United States?
The backlash over teaching about racism in American schools.
I don't think it has any place in the classroom.
We can either pretend and say, no, we're not racist and we're all great people, or we can actually start to do the really, really hard work of addressing it.
How did you lose your job? I made the statement that white privilege is a fact.
Is it helping diversity and inclusion?
When you bring in different people's stories and experience, it enriches education.
If you don't talk about something, it doesn't go away.
Or driving us further apart?
What schools are doing to our children in the name of anti-racism is in fact teaching them racism.
The intention is to put us in this war against each other.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
I was entitled to equal pay for equal work under the law.
Does the Supreme Court's power need to be checked?
9 Supreme Court justices, 5 of them said no, she's not entitled. That's not right.
Calls to fix the court tend to go along with the politics of the moment.
Republican-appointed justices have all tended to go in one direction, with the Democratic-appointed justices tending to go in another.
Even though it's only 9 justices, it takes 5 of them to make the law of the land.
Does it have political impact? True. Political intent? Probably not true.
If the American people don't trust the judgment of their court, that's a real problem for our democracy.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.
On our places, bright shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my 2 good friends, and we talk about the world.
Welcome back to America Decides. With Senator Tim Scott formally declaring his candidacy for president yesterday and Ron DeSantis set to announce his bid tomorrow, the race is taking shape. Another Republican who is considering whether to throw his own hat in the ring is Miami Mayor Francis Suarez. And Mayor Suarez joins us now from Miami. Mayor, thanks for being with us.
Oh, wonderful to be with you. Thank you for the opportunity.
So, Mr. Mayor, we learned today that your governor is going to be getting into the Republican primary tomorrow. Mr. DeSantis is going to be announcing it in a Twitter appearance with Elon Musk. I'm wondering what you think of that choice and what you think of Ron DeSantis' chances in the GOP primary.
Well, look, I think right now the front runner is the former president. I mean, he's in the sort of pole position and sort of dominating in the polls. I think there's the former president and there's everybody else. And I think the person who will be the potential nominee has to be someone that can captivate the hearts and minds of Republican voters, hopefully by giving them an option or an opportunity to look at the viability of a future with whoever that candidate is. I think that candidate should be generational, and I don't mean that as a buzzword. I mean that as someone who could provide generational opportunities for this country, for everyone to be prosperous. I think it has to be someone who has an executive record of success and has a positive vision for the future. And I think it should be someone that can broaden the party so that you don't just focus on one election, but you focus on a generation of elections. Someone that can, potentially attract Hispanics, someone that can attract young voters, and someone that can attract voters in cities. I was elected by 85% and reelected by close to 80%. And I think that's important in trying to attract new voters to the Republican Party.
Well, it sounds like you are describing yourself as that generational candidate. And you recently said that you think the 2024 race on the Republican side is going to come down to Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis, and someone else. When are you going to decide if you want to be that someone else?
Well, it has to be soon. That's one thing I know. I'm someone who has been blessed to lead the city that I was born in, to create some incredible things in our city and create some, lower taxes so that we've had the second most growth in our history, having the lowest per capita homicide rate since the 1960s, which is a problem in urban America, and being, number one in wage growth and having the lowest unemployment. So that's the kind of America that we want to live in. We don't want to live in Joe Biden's America, frankly, which is an America where the poor get poorer. Right, we live in a country right now where if you're a person of little means, what's happening is you're losing purchasing power with your dollars in your bank account, and the cost of borrowing is going up. It's getting harder to be successful, in Joe Biden's America, and I think we need a change.
Kellyanne Conway said that you'd make a great running mate for Donald Trump, but you didn't reject that idea when Margaret Brennan asked you about it on Sunday on Face the Nation, even though you didn't vote for former President Trump in either 2016 or 2020. Why didn't you vote for him?
Well, look, I think the reason why I didn't reject it is because, anytime that someone's talking about you as a presidential candidate or a vice presidential candidate, having grown up in this country, being the son of 2 Cuban exiles, it's an incredible honor to be discussed in those terms. I mean, it's something that I would have never thought, having grown up, been born and raised in Miami, being the first Miami-born mayor in its history. I honestly never thought that I would actually be talking about running for president. I think one of the great things about this country, frankly, is the fact that it constantly surprises people in presidential elections. We didn't potentially think that we were going to have the first African-American president until Barack Obama was elected. And we probably didn't think that we were going to have, a president that was not in politics, that was sort of a reality TV show personality and a real estate developer, and the first non-politician, non-military person in decades become the president. So America has done some incredible things. When President Clinton was elected, you had President Bush with a 90% approval rating coming out of the Iraq War, and a relatively unknown governor of Arkansas won the presidency. So America is incredibly dynamic. It knows what it wants, and it understands that it needs someone to meet the moment.
Well, we'll be watching to see what you decide. Miami Mayor Francis Suarez, thank you.
Thank you.
And that does it for today. You can stream America Decides Monday to Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. You've been streaming CBS News. Have a good one.
It's a history-making meeting. 4 extraordinary women who are all 4-star generals and admirals.
How did you deal with being discriminated against?
I just worked harder.
The future of an ever-evolving U.S. military when we go